understanding what the demand drivers are in that market is certainly going to be that's certainly going to have an impact on what your approach is as an investor. So again, we talked about asset-based versus location-based. When you're looking at a market, you're largely going to be trying to understand the location-based demand. So what that would look like is obviously are there big tourism draws to that area, like skiing or beaches or lakes or water parks or amusement parks or thriving downtown,
Right.
whatever it may be. It can take many different shapes and forms. But beyond that, it could be sort of what industry is relevant there.
Right. I would even add to, is the demand seasonal?
Right. So I think that's certainly a takeaway from, like, there's a whole list of things. Once you identify what the demand is, I think there's like a series of questions that you ask based on what the answer to that question is.
Right.
That helps guide what the path forward looks like.
So for our inquiry, I think, our STRs, short-term rentals in Atlantic City, are predominantly driven by the fact that you can go to Atlantic City and go gambling at the casinos, and also that you can go to the beach, kind of like the draws of any Jersey Shore town that also has gambling, which is only Atlantic City. And that demand is, I would say, quite seasonal. So our demand really peaks probably in June or July. And then every kind of month further away from that month is less. And, probably like the doldrums, like the worst months for us are like February and October, November, something like that. Because in November, December, we get some peaks for the holidays. But October is, everyone's back in school.
January is pretty slow.
February is like the dead of winter, which is where we are right now. But I think, obviously, it goes without saying that if you have a place in a ski town, that is the opposite case. Probably June, July is dead, and January, February is extremely busy.
One thing I want to point out, though, about understanding demand is I think there's the very obvious conclusions that you might draw, like what you described, the way you described Atlantic City as, casino town, a beach town. That's certainly is what it is on the surface. Similarly, for Deer Valley or Park City, Utah, you would say, it's a ski town. But I think as you do a little bit more research, you may come to find out that there are other demand drivers for that area. Like something I don't think I would have realized when getting into before getting into STRs in Atlantic City was how robust the kind of conference scene is there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say like there are conferences, shows, things of that nature pretty regularly, conventions, pretty regularly. I would say like, concerts. I would say there are like multiple events like that each month.
Right.
And, I don't think that has a huge impact on demand in the summer because that demand is largely vacation, beach, that kind of thing. But in the off season, I would say that has certainly been a nice wind at our back, because it's not just weekends, but it also drives weekday demand. I
think another way that I might say it is that I've been surprised at how much demand there is for almost every market that we have been operating in. I think there's more demand in the off-season in Atlantic City than I would have guessed, particularly for larger units. I think that's something we've been finding, larger meaning more bedrooms. And there's even demand in places like New Haven, Connecticut, where we have operated STRs, which is sort of unbelievable to me because of the, some of the areas of the city that we operated STRs in. But, even there is demand that isn't, say, necessarily driven by Yale or the universities there. There's demand because there are events happening or things at the hospital or whatever else.
Yeah. And I think part of what we've learned from doing Airbnb is that it's the platform, Airbnb, Vrbo, everything kind of holistically. Those platforms are so good at aggregating demand and just distributing it towards wherever there's supply, that you're never going to be able to figure out exactly or every single thing that is driving people to stay at your places. Yeah. But the more intention you put behind figuring out what the main drivers are going to be, I think that will help you. That will inform some of your decisions down the line, both in terms of underwriting, but also in terms of identifying what it is that you want to do with your units to make them most suitable. As an example, like despite I would say despite the like recent surge nationwide in remote work, I would say Atlantic City is generally not the type of place that people are going to stay for a week to work remotely and just kind of get away from wherever they are regularly. But if our market was the Hudson Valley and we had cabins or bungalows or cottages, things of that nature, that probably isn't something we originally would have accounted for. But if you go into it knowing or with the expectation that may be a driver of demand, then maybe it's as simple as putting a desk in your place that suddenly takes it from being viable for someone to stay for a month in the off season to inviable, or the opposite.
Right.
And I think the same thing goes for catering to more family-centric travel, or catering towards more party-going groups.
Right.
We talked about that with some STRs that we were looking at
True.
earlier today.
Yeah, I think to your point, understanding demand informs probably the type of asset that you want to buy, right? So if I'm buying an asset in Orlando, I'm probably going to want to buy an asset that can accommodate families, not a studio apartment, because probably there aren't a lot of, individual people or couples that are going to Disney World. It's probably predominantly families. But on the flip side, if I'm buying somewhere where I expect there to be primarily like solo travelers, maybe like somewhere remote where people go hiking or something like that, probably that's not catering to families with young kids as much. So it might be more appropriate to buy something that's like, okay, I could understand a couple coming kind of alone without their family to this location.
Right. Yeah. I think the significance of understanding demand is first and foremost, it allows you to target what it is that you should be buying. And then secondly, once you have identified what you're going to buy or what you already own, you can better design and configure the space to appeal to the, to appeal most closely to what it is that your target demographic wants.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget to visit us at brickxbrickrealestate.com for free content to help you along your real estate journey and to follow along on our projects. Subscribe and rate us on your favorite podcast app and engage with us online via Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and brickxbrickrealestate.com. See you next time on the Brick by Brick podcast.